But the first people that I'm going to introduce are Augustin Aguayo and his wife Helga Aguayo. Augustin is just back after serving 8 months for refusing a second deployment to Iraq. He just spoke at he's spoken on the West Coast at some welcome back meetings. I found out there that while in Iraq he refused to load his gun because of what he was thinking about and finding out at the time. And I think he's a real model for the kind of resistance that actually has the potential to stop this war. While he was fighting the legal battle for his freedom, his wife Helga was organizing tirelessly in Los Angeles, both for his freedom and to support him, but also to end this war in a much broader way. She's become an excellent anti-war leader herself, so we're going to start with Helga Aguayo.
Wow, thank you for that warm welcome. It's so strange for me. I've spoken about Augustine so many times, of him, about him, our struggles, and now it's weird for me because he's right here. I don't know how many people here know from the beginning, what happened, but I'll start there. On September 2nd, my husband refused a second deployment to Iraq. And we thought he would be court-martialed and sent to prison, and that would be the end of it, but that didn't happen. They brought him back to our house, and they said that they would take him by force to Iraq. And we were there, my daughters, we have two 12-year-olds now, twins, and myself. And actually the GI rights counselor in Germany, the director, was at our home. He was trying to help us sort through this whole mess. And they came to our house, brought him, and said, "You're going to Iraq. Get it through your head. You're going. Get your stuff. Put your uniform on." He was in civilian clothes. The day before, he missed the movement. And then that morning, I drove him to the MP station. Actually, there's a video on it on YouTube if you look it up. And I took a video of him turning himself in and saying goodbye to our daughters. And then a few hours later, they brought him home, and they said that they would shackle him, handcuff him, carry him on the plane if he refused to go. So what he did was he pretended to cooperate. He put on his uniform and refused to grab his Iraq gear, and they took him away and brought him back a few hours later with two sergeants and said, same story, you have to just grab your stuff. So he pretended to cooperate, and then I saw him go down the hallway, and he gave me this look. He said, "Helga, I'm getting my Iraq gear. Do you know where my Kevlar is?" And when he gave me this look, I knew that he was planning something, and I was just like, oh God, what am I gonna do? And so I asked the sergeants to sit down, told them where the Kevlar was, and he started coming out and bringing bags, and I'm looking at him like, is he really grabbing his things, or what's going on? And turns out that he pretended to cooperate, like I mentioned, and jumped out the back window. During that time, I didn't know what to do. I heard the jump. In Germany, we're on the first floor, but the first floors are really high. And so I heard the jump, and I was terrified. I said, oh God, they're gonna know something's up. So I distracted them as best I could, and the only thing I could think of to distract was to just cry, just let it all out, and just make them so embarrassed. And so they couldn't even make eye contact. They were just staring at the floor, my daughters are there, our dogs are barking at them, and they're just sitting there in shame, just staring at the floor. And people just find this hard to believe, but it's true. 45 minutes passed. And then I finally got up and thought, okay, I've given him enough time. So I go and call him knowing that he's not going to respond. And then I tell them, he's gone. And they're like, what do you mean he's gone? And I said, the window's wide open. And they go back there, look, and window's wide open. And then they kind of, didn't know what to do and start running back and forth. And by that time, Augie's way gone on his way, where he laid low for a while. And then for me and for my daughters, our hell began. Because from that point on, they came to the house, they searched the house, and it was a form of intimidation because they not only searched like under the bed and in the closets, they were looking in medicine cabinets and cabinets in the pantry, places where obviously Augustine would not fit. And it was a form of intimidation, and MPs were coming by. Interesting, though, that they didn't want to tell the MPs. They kept on coming saying, we don't want anyone to know. And finally, when enough hours had passed, they had to call the MPs, and they filed a report. And the guy from the GI rights hotline was, they were questioning him, questioning me, questioning our daughters, and it was horrible. At one point, the first sergeant of Augie's unit came and said that Augustine could and might even be put to death in front of our daughters because he was a deserter. And of course, that just hurt us deeply. And then articles started coming out in the press, because we decided to go public. Right before Augustine jumped out the window, I said to him in Spanish, are we going to the press? And he said, I guess the Army wants it this way. And so from that point on, we had people around the country, because we were in Germany, around the world, just waiting for a phone call to go to press. And fortunately, we had some good friends and people that were willing and able and just ready to volunteer for us and just take this to the media and work really hard. And Augustine eventually found himself back here in the U.S. and turned himself in a second time. And to our dismay, he was brought back to Germany. And he was court-martialed, and he was charged with missing movement and desertion, and both those charges together could have totaled 7 years. And that's, we were expecting the worst. We really were. We were preparing for the worst, and I would torture myself with the thought that my daughters would be 18 when they'd see him again. And it was horrible, but we had the resolve to fight and get as much publicity and as much support as we could, because we realized that not doing that really hurt us. Many people don't realize that Augustine has been fighting for the right to be recognized as a conscientious objector since 2003. And, September of 2006, that was the culmination of this battle. We've actually sued Steve Harvey, the Secretary of the Army. We're on our third round with that. And we still have 2 simultaneous court cases, one in the Circuit District Court of Appeals, and eventually that might go to the Supreme Court. And now we have one in the UCMJ military, their justice system, which is a big joke, but it's in their appeals system. And that one will eventually end up in the federal courts should we decide to pursue it, and might end up in the Supreme Court as well. And so anyway, we had this battle. We even ended up going to Mexico. My mother-in-law went to Mexico on an invitation of a small group of activists, and they ended up taking it even to the Congress there. And I get this phone call saying that the Congress, Mexican Congress, unanimously voted to ask the president for help for Augustine to intervene. And they, on their official Mexican government website, it says that even though Augustin is a U.S. citizen and even though they don't usually intervene, they were going to because they felt that this was so wrong. And they sent someone to the court martial. And at one point, we were debating whether they would send a Mexican attorney to be on the team. And it just became this really big thing. And actually, the ISO in LA really helped us. I mean, you guys are amazing. You know, you guys put Augustin's name out there, and I was, you know, marching and had invitations to speak at different places that the ISO was sponsoring and co-sponsoring, and it's been amazing. But one of the messages that I want to say is that not all soldiers that resist have a family that's willing to put themselves out there. They don't have a family that's willing to do everything and anything. I mean, we had posters, cards, buttons, everything, free Augustin. That was my message, free Augustin. But there's a lot of families that are ashamed when a soldier does what Augustin did. I'm like his #1 cheerleader and so proud of him. And one of the stories that I can tell you that demonstrates this is one of my closest friends in Germany, her husband was sent back for the 2-week rest and recuperation, and he went AWOL the last night. He told his wife, oh, I have to go back early, and he ended up going AWOL, and he called her and said, I can't go back. He had been in the Army for about 12 years. He was a sergeant, a staff sergeant, and he said, I can't go back, I don't want to go back, I'm not going back. Where are you, honey? And then she calls the commander and tells him where her husband is at. She didn't want her husband to go back to Iraq. But the fear that a family feels, the fear, the overwhelming fear, and especially in Germany, because not only are you on a base, but you're in another country. They came, picked him up, and charged him with being AWOL, and took him back to Iraq. The desperation that soldiers feel, we knew of many soldiers that tried to commit suicide in Iraq, and they weren't sent back to Germany. They were just kept there, and it was a big secret. Many soldiers that actually committed suicide after coming back from Iraq and were in Germany. It's the fear that's put on the families is so overwhelming that it's really hard. And I think groups like yours can really help soldiers that don't have a support system, because I know that your support really helped us, and I want to thank you all for being there for us when we really needed your support and for allowing us to share our story here, and I'm honored to be here. Thank you.